in Britain, like Manchester, Liverpool. So after getting our raw material, they always produced processed material, and then they resend to India to sell it. And by those methods, they always earn great money, but we will always suffer. So when we get our finished foods like cotton, silk, and woolen cloths, and capital goods like light machinery produced in factories of Britain. So, for all purposes, Britain maintained a monopoly control over India's export and import. So, when we divide our products, imported products into two parts, so like consumer product and capital goods. So those two lists are like consumer goods, consumer goods, and consumer goods like cotton, like uh, salt, jute, these all things. So this always come after processed. When these items were processed in Britain, so Britain was becoming a great nation, a rich nation by utilizing these primary products and converted into secondary level. Now this is known as the secondary sector also. So these are the lists, two lists, and that was the consumer goods like cotton, silk, and woolen cloth cap. Or another list is capital good, capital goods. Capital goods are like light machinery, light machinery. So capital goods are those goods which always produce the cash and big cash. And India was needed a great machinery system for both the thing that Indian traders they need it, and some Britishers they also developed some industries in India. So both the thing were there. So capital goods is the light machineries produced in factories of Britain. So light machinery is light machinery is you can say the primary tools to process some items. So light machinery was there. When we say heavy machinery, in fact nowadays, in fact today, India is a great importer of heavy machinery, right? So heavy machinery and light machinery. So light machinery always needed at that time because in India at primary level, Indian traders, British traders, so they make some primary items. They always fresh. They always try to make fresh it. They always try to like cutting and peeling. This was the thing which always needed the primary machinery and the light machinery. This is the real concept. So Britain always tried to maintain, and later he regularly maintained a monopoly over India's export and import. As a result, more than half of India's foreign trade was restricted to Britain, while the rest was allowed with a few other countries like China, Ceylon, Sri Lanka, and Persia. Persia now is known as Iran. The opening of Suez Canal further intensified British control over India's foreign trade. So that was also the thing that how more than half of the India's foreign trades was restricted to Britain. How? Right? So that was the result when Britain developed a monopoly over India's export and import. So India was both the producer and importer. It became both. You can say the both subject, both items, both services. So India became importer as well as exporter as well as, and trader. So the opening of Suez Canal further intensified British control over India's foreign trade. The most foreign trade, when we say the foreign trade, foreign trade, foreign trade means we import something and export something. Right? Foreign trade, both the things are involved in that system. So as a result, more than half of the foreign trade was restricted to Britain. And what happened? The opening of Suez Canal intensified. How Suez Canal intensified British control over India's trade? Because you know Suez Canal was a mediator between the Asian countries and the African countries, and that was also there was also a great route to Europe, right? So that was the point, the opening of Suez Canal. Opening of Suez Canal, when we say Suez Canal, it means Suez Canal was not naturally opened. Suez Canal, not naturally opened, that was opened by the human effort. So you can say that was the artificial effort. So the most important characteristics of India's foreign trade. What was the most important characteristics India's foreign trade? Throughout the colonial period was the generation of a large export surplus. That was the most important characteristic of Indian foreign trade throughout the colonial period, was the generation of large export surplus. Generation of large export surplus. Large export surplus. That was the result, right? But this surplus came at a huge cost to countries' economy. Huge cost. And huge cost to countries' economy. How? If I say how, because not even in currency matter, but in all political, social and economical backwardness was created by Britishers, and how Indian became weak, how Indian cultivators, they faced famine at that time, and most of the Indian were died due to hunger. So that was the real problem, and our economical loss was also there. So several essential commodities like food grains, cloth, kerosene, etc. were scarcely available in the domestic market. So three things were, and etc. many more things were scarcely available in. Always these products like food grains, cloth, always scarcely available. Food grains, because most of the items were exported to Europe and other countries. So food grains, first item, and the cloth and kerosene. You know kerosene, what was the use of kerosene? Kerosene to for fuel, also for lighting the diya and lamp at that time. Kerosene, right? So kerosene was also needed there, and kerosene when needed there, so we face a scarcity of these items. So domestic market always needed these items, and furthermore, this export surplus did not result in any flow of gold or silver in India. right? Because we had no, not, we means not even, I'm talking about the real Indian government, because we were ruling by Britishers. So we cannot say that we got gold or silver. If the gold and silver was available in India, most of the Britishers, they were utilizing for their government, for their salaries also. So this was used to make payment for the expenses. This was the thing. As I told you, this was the used to make payments for the expenses incurred by an office set up by colonial government in Britain. Britain, you know, we were known as the British Indian, we were known as the British India, and when the British government allowed company to intervene into Indian matters and to run the Indian administration, so you may understand why there was need of carrying the economical burden or expenses by ourselves. But Britain was utilizing this. Britain was exporting, importing the things. She always imposed taxes on Indians while we were exporting. When we import, we were also imposed taxes. So both the time we were paying taxes to Britain, and Britain was becoming rich. So expenses on war, again fought by British government. So sometimes we Indian also had to face the burden of that particular warfare as the tax. So, and the import of invisible items. So all of which led to the drain of Indian wealth. So that was the point, how the Indian wealth was drained to Europe or to Britain. Indian wealth was Britain. So you may use the term payment, expenses, warfare, or these things, right? So both the taxes, import tax, export tax, warfare, expenses, payments, all these things, this was the drain to Britain. And you know, Dadabhai Naoroji was the first person who raised this thing at that time, how the Indian wealth was drained. Wealth means not even money, but I am talking about wealth, all the resources, all the minerals, like these things also. So when we say import and export, so you have also these points, you have to keep these points in your mind. Then when we use import and export, it means there is a list of import items, there is a list of export items, and both the time how we were producers, how we were buying, how we were receiving those processing products in India. So both the time we always paid taxes, and we also faced some restricted policies in terms of sometimes importing the goods and sometimes exporting the goods. Now we will talk about the demographic condition, how India has demographic condition. Demographic condition. Various details about the population of British India was first collected through a census in 1881, right? So first census. When we say the first census, that was the officially census in 1881. That was the time of Governor General Lord Ripon. Lord Ripon was the Governor General that time, right? Lord Ripon was the Governor General that time. Though suffering from certain limitation, it revealed the unevenness in India's population growth. Unevenness, how sometimes is go high, sometimes goes down. So first census in 1881, that was the first official census, right? If a question is there regarding first census, the concept that was done by Lord. I'm not getting that point. In 1872, Lord Mayo. That was the time. Okay. So the first census, official census, was completed by, was initiated by, you may say that was initiated by Lord Ripon. So subsequently, after every 10 years, such census operations were carried out. Before 1921, India was in the first stage of demographic transition. In 1921, I am talking about before 1921, India was the first stage of demographic transition before 1921. However, neither the total population of India nor the rate of population growth at this stage was very high. Not high. That was the result, not high. That is the result, not high. The various social development indicators were also not quite encouraging. The overall literacy level was less than 16%. Literacy rate was less than 16%. So now you may understand how the India was facing that kind of disturbances in that time. Out of this, the female literacy level was at negligible. Like, so you may say that was the male literacy which I am talking about. Negligible, matlab, less than 1%. So low of about 7% to 1% to 7%. And public health facilities were either unavailable to large chunks of population. So there was also a problem of public health facilities. Public health facilities. Public health facilities. Right? So that was either unavailable to large chunks of population. When available, were highly inadequate. Consequently, water and airborne diseases were rampant and took a huge toll on life. So there was two problems of water diseases like 𝐻𝐸𝐽 and many more diseases I am talking about, and airborne diseases. Like we face corona in 2019-20 phase, but that time many more things, many more diseases were there. So that was rampant and took a huge toll on life. No wonder the overall mortality rate was so high. So that was the result of that policy which was developed by Britishers. And you know, Britishers, they never care how the Indian were died, so they have not especially responsibility. The mortality rate was high. So these are some concepts, these are some facts you may understand, and by knowing all these facts, you can write any essay, any long question, short question, that how this content developed in our nation. So when we say high, it means many, we are not talking about more than lakhs or crores. I'm talking about when we say according to census, it means per thousand people, how many people were died. So mortality rate is always considered like that. So particularly the infant mortality rate was quite alarming, about 218, yani 218 per thousand, in contrast to the present infant mortality rate of 28 per thousand. So that time infant mortality rate, that time infant mortality rate was 218 per thousand. That is official data. So real data, I can't tell you the real exact data, but that was described that time, and now we are studying in NCERT books. And today's or the present infant mortality rate is 28%. Present mortality rate is 28 per thousand. So you may get the real difference. Life expectancy was also very low, 32 years in contrast to the present 69 years. That time life expectancy, how people say that that time life expectancy was so high. Expectancy was 32. A present, as that was described, 69. In the absence of reliable data, it is difficult to specify the extent of poverty at that time, but there is no doubt that extensive poverty prevailed in India during the colonial period, which contributed the worsening profile of India's population of the time. Now we'll discuss about occupational structure. We'll discuss about occupational structure. Occupational structure. Occupational structure. During the colonial period, the occupational structure, for example, distribution of working persons across different industries and sectors, showed little sign of change, right? The agricultural sector accounted, the total agriculture sector, primary, secondary, not I am talking of the total agriculture sector, right? So telegraph system, you may know, the agriculture sector accounted for telegraph did develop. However, the real motive behind the development was not to provide basic amenities to the people, but to subserve various colonial interests. That was the real thing. Road constructed in India. So telegraph, we'll talk about telegraph. Road constructed to transport all the material goods from one place to another place. It was prior to the advent of British rule, were not fit for modern transport. The roads that were built primarily served the purpose of mobilizing the army within India and drawing out raw materials from the countryside to the nearest railway station or the port to send these far away England or other lucrative foreign destinations. That was the real reason behind constructing the road. So there were three reasons why they constructed the road. First was to move the army from one place to another place, and second was to send the materials from one place to another place. And after getting from railway station or port, they sent to those items to England or other foreign destination. So there always remained an acute shortage of all weather roads to reach out the rural areas during the rainy season. Naturally, therefore, people mostly living in those areas suffered grievously during natural calamities and famines. That was the terminology, that was the thing which I also discussed. The British introduced the railways in India 1850, and it is considered as one of the most most important contribution. So British introduced railways railways in 1850s. That was the time of Lord Dalhousie in India. Lord Dalhousie ruled as governor in India from 1848 to 1854, right? And it is considered as one of the most important contribution of Britishers. The railway affected the structure of Indian economy in two important way. On the one hand, it enabled people to undertake long distance. Because by using railway, the people could travel to the long distance travel, and thereby break geographical and cultural barriers. Geographical and cultural barriers. How they broke geographical and cultural barriers? Because when they traveled in train, they meet some person, they interact with other persons on some issues. The issues might be social issues, national issues, and that was the phase of transformation of the nation as well as the people's mind. So it fostered commercialization of Indian agriculture, which adversely affected the self-sufficiency of the village economic in India. In ancient time and before the pre-medieval phase, village economies were self-sufficient. They produce for their own dependency and do no need to get from outside. But primary reason was how the village lose their self-sufficiency in Indian economics. So that was the most of the important reasons were to develop these constructive things in India by Britishers. The volume of India's export undoubtedly expanded, but its benefit rarely occurred to the Indian people. So when we saw the British Indian people, British India, right? The volume of India's export undoubtedly expanded. Its benefits rarely occurred to the Indian people, right? The social benefits. So social benefit, when we talk about the social benefits to Indian. So that was the economical benefit, the social benefit, which the Indian people gained owing to the introduction of railway, were thus outweighed by country's huge economic loss. Along with the development of roads and railway, the colonial dispensation also took measure for developing the inland trade. Inland trade, that was the result of introduction of transport, inland trade, that became easy because by getting these roads and railway, one person could would go to other place. by carrying goods for buying or purchasing. So took measure for developing the inland trade and sea lanes, sea lanes, right? So that was the thing. The inland waterways at times also proved uneconomical, as in the case of the coast canal of the Orissa coast. So there is a perception still going around that in many ways in British administration India were quite beneficial. No, it's beneficial for Britishers. Though the canal was built at a huge cost to the government exchequer, yet it is failed to compete the railways, which soon traversed the region running parallel to the canal, and had to be ultimately abandoned. The introduction of the expensive system of electric telegraph in India similarly served the purpose of maintaining a law and order. That was the purpose, real purpose, how this telegraph helped British administration for law and order, right? Telegraph mode of communication always help Britishers, right? So there was a thing to maintain law and order, that thing was used. The postal services, on other hand, despite serving a useful public purpose, remained all those inadequate. The postal services. And the postal service was also helping Britishers, right? So these are the things. How this system helped Britishers to utilize those benefits. Now we come to conclusion. Come to conclusion. By the time India won its independence, the impact of 2-century long British colonial rule was already showing on all aspects of Indian economy, right? So I am talking about conclusion. By the time India won its independence, the impact of 2-century long British colonial rule was already showing on all aspects of Indian economy. The agricultural sector was already saddled with surplus labor and extremely low productivity. The industrial sector was crying for modernization, diversification, capacity building, and increased public investment. Foreign trade was oriented to feed the industrial revolution in Britain. Infrastructure facilities, including the famed railway network, needed upgradation, expansion, and public orientation. Prevalence of rampant poverty and unemployment required welfare orientation of public economic policy. In a nutshell, the social and economic challenges before the country were so enormous. So, when we talking about the conclusion, we always see that how many more fields, many more things were so needed, upgradation, upliftment, and investment of foreign, or you may say the British money and British policy. So after getting these things, what we know that understanding of the economy before independence is necessary to know the appreciate the level of development achieving during the post-independence period. Under the colonial dispensation, the economic policies of government were concerned more with the promotion of British economic interests, and then with the need to develop the Indian or economic condition of colonized country at its people, right? So that was the thing what we discuss as conclusion. And if we see some question that What was the focus of economic policies pursued by colonial government in India? Focus of economic policies. Economic policies. When we say economic policies, so economic and policies, though two terms are there, economic and policies. When you say economic, you may list import, export, expenses, paying, right? All these things these things come under this economic. And when you say policies, policies was always developed by Britishers for Indian, for Britishers, for foreigners. So you may divide this question. So today we finish this chapter. Tomorrow we'll start our second chapter of Indian economics, and we'll meet you soon. Thank you so much for being here.